finally started college, then on to graduate school where I earned my master's and doctorate. Now, all that education was expensive, but what I learned was priceless. What I discovered about both men and women was surprising, beautiful, and amazingly simple. Our respective desires are different, but they're complementary, almost as if they were God designed. I discovered that every woman dreams about being swept off her feet by a man who knows how to lead gently and confidently, protecting her and guiding her on the dance floor of life. She has no problem following him and giving herself to him. She adores him because she knows he wants only the best for her. How does she know? Because he listens to her, comforts and reassures her, and takes everything she says under consideration as he choreographs their dance. Oops, I just switched metaphors on you, didn't I? Sorry about that. I also discovered that every man dreams about a sweet companion with whom he can share his life. He is inspired by her and motivated to protect and provide for her. He wants to spend time with her because she reflects all that's right and good about him. When he messes up, he instantly knows, without her saying a word, because he is sensitive to everything about her. He feels safe with her because her feedback is always gentle, discreet, and affirming. Plus, he knows he can count on her to make him look good to anyone who's watching. Do you think that's true about your mate? If things aren't going well for you right now, you probably find it hard to believe what I just said. If so, you're in good company, because everyone, despite his or her best efforts, runs into a roadblock sooner or later. So, what is a relational roadblock? Well, it's anything that disrupts the flow of your romance. And it probably happened much earlier in your own relationship than you care to admit. Human beings are notoriously good at ignoring problems, especially when they're in love. We want to hold on to the romantic high, so we find a way to go around the problem to protect the relationship. Now, that's not an issue if it only happens once, but often the pattern repeats and repeats until it becomes a deep rut that you can't get out of. At that point, you don't even realize what's happening. You just follow the map you created together, growing further and further apart and using the bulk of your mental and emotional energy to maintain that pattern. It's a bumpy ride for both of you. Nevertheless, you always have the freedom to choose. You can avoid the roadblocks in your marriage. It's a complicated strategy, but it comes naturally. That is, it doesn't take any forethought. Just live defensively. Protect yourself. Keep quiet. Don't rock the boat. Let your mate make the decisions and be in charge of everything. But in the long run, that strategy will leave you feeling like the victim in your own story, powerless to change anything or to have any control over your own life. On the other hand, you could choose to power your way through the roadblocks, like a steamroller on a mission. Don't back down on anything. Take charge. Be the boss. Be aggressive. Be angry if you need to. If that's your strategy, your mate is probably passive, acting like a victim. Someone needs to step up. Your mate isn't doing it or can't do it. But using this strategy over the long haul, you will become the villain in your own story. Being the villain is exhausting because you're heavily invested in every single outcome. And sadly, you've surrendered the possibility of being loved. Or maybe you started out as someone who avoids roadblocks, but you've taken it as long as you can. So you've switched over into anger and become the villain. Or a more likely scenario, you're angry with yourself for being angry with your mate. That's pretty common, especially among Christian men. Now you're your own worst enemy, filled with self-loathing for being such a wimp. The effect is the same as trying to drive a car with your foot on the brake. But what if there were a third option? What if you didn't have to be the victim or the villain, but could become the hero or heroine of your own story instead? In reality, the solution is simple. Not always obvious or easy, of course, but simple nonetheless. Let's talk about how to turn those roadblocks into milestones. First, pause and take a good long look at that roadblock. Don't just crash through it, dismiss it, or turn a blind eye. Really take a look at it. Chances are you've complained to one or more of your friends about it already. It's equally likely that they get where you're coming from because the same thing has happened to them. Yes, both men and women have had the same complaints about one another forever. And that's actually good news. If our complaints about one another sound so familiar, then we've got a lot of data to consider. Like every good scientist, though, you need to learn how to interpret the data correctly. But most of us don't have an accurate template of the opposite sex. We don't listen to one another because we're more invested in being right than we are in understanding and being understood or loved. That's how I learned the truth about men. First, I learned to listen. Then, I listened to learn. And along the way, I listened to and learned about women, including myself. Once I had charted the territory and created the map showing potential roadblocks and how to interpret them, my work became a joyous and endless treasure hunt for truth in relationships.